Nick, will you play us a Happy Friday tune?
Yeah. Welcome, everybody.
Well, welcome to the podcast, everyone.
Yeah, welcome. A lot of cool things to talk about. We're going to be talking about a lot of projects that we're working on today.
Projects that we've done over the last couple months.
Yeah. Both projects, both here at Corridor and personal creative projects as well.
Nice.
Good time. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Let's start with things that have come out recently. So, Wren, the Glass Moon video came out recently.
What would happen during the eclipse if the moon was made out of glass?
Mm.
I'm really happy with that video. I think it came out really, really well. I think Daniel and I had a really good workflow on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I've been doing lately that I think I'm going to try to continue doing is straight up, I'm the one who makes the intro. As opposed to trying to work with someone on like what the intro should be. I've found that like, I tend to have a very specific vision for how to introduce the video. And I think it just ends up being easier for me to execute that vision. I did that on the Mortar, the 360 Canon video too. Yeah, so that way, like Austin on that video or Daniel on the other video can focus on like the rest of the edit and various things like that. And it's like, okay, instead of trying to communicate what I think the intro should be, I'm just going to plan it. And that way, I'm not having to worry about the rest of the video and having to edit it all, but I can focus on making sure that this intro is like really succinct and working well.
Yeah. Well, we found that like focusing on like the introduction of your video is super important. And like the way YouTube's built now is that introduction is basically your thumbnail.
Pretty much, yeah.
So like we have this whole process of storytelling now when it comes to like a video. You have the picture, which is the very first thing that people see, which needs to be interesting enough to keep their eye there to read the text on the picture, which then needs to be interesting enough to make them read the title for context. And once they've read the title for context, that needs to be interesting enough for them to want to watch the first couple seconds of the video to learn what the context of the title, what the question is. And then in those first 10 to 15 seconds, you need to hit them with something that's so compelling that they will sit down and watch the rest of the video. So it's a whole process. Yeah.
I'm curious where your guys' eyes go when you see a video pop up on YouTube. Do you read the text in the thumbnail first and then go down?
Yeah.
You do? Yeah.
I don't
Same.
know.
I found myself doing that.
It depends. Like, my eye will be drawn to whatever words are biggest, I think. So it's like if there is text in the thumbnail, I think I'll read it, but I don't think I consciously read it. I think I usually try to read the title as soon as I can. It's like, I think my brain just kind of absorbs the thumbnail as a whole, words and composition and everything. And if I'm remotely interested, my eyes immediately flick to reading the title as fast as I can. I think that's how I ingest YouTube. I don't know.
But I definitely found that like doing a well thought out, well written, well produced introduction really helps me like clarify what the entire video is going to be about in my actual creative process. Your introduction was super cool.
With the Glass Moon?
With the Glass Moon. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I had this idea of like, what if like we actually show the eclipse in the studio and then reveal that, oh, no, it's just a CG moon that's floating there. And then it transitions to glass. And then various other elements of that intro kind of came a little bit later, like such as the text being 3D tracked into the scene. And then at the last moment, I ended up adding the text into the refraction of the glass. And I did that as a 2D effect after the fact. It's not technically refracting anything. I used an After Effects plugin or an effect to like, I think it was actually optics compensation on like a pre-composed layer that was then 3D tracked into the shot. And it's just laying on top of the glass. Okay. So I think it should be bending more or less correctly, but it's not actually being refracted through the glass moon. Gotcha. But what's interesting about that moon is that I had to animate the scale of the moon. No, the position of the moon. Because of where the camera was placed and where that light box was placed for the moon to be placed directly above that light, it had to be, I forget the specifics. It was like really far away from the camera. So as soon as the camera starts sliding to the right, the moon actually animates to a different position to allow for me to walk around it because the space if I was to actually have it be locked into position where it was, by the time the camera moves around, it would have been about the size of a basketball. And I was like, I don't want it to be the size of a basketball. Come on now. I want it to be a large thing. And then, of course, the whole gag about it burning the wall was the thing that sort of evolved beyond what I had initially, because we have this freaking intern who's very talented at visual effects. And I asked him to put a little bit more fire on the wall. And then I look at the shot and he has every square inch of the wall covered in fire. I was like, what? What? I just asked to put a little bit of fire on the wall, not the entire house burning down. But it was so extra that I thought it was kind of funny. So we kept it.
Nice.
But yeah, no, and then the ending of that where like the eclipse is coming. And the idea is that people expect the glass moon during an eclipse to act like a magnifying glass, to burn the world. And so I was like, okay, let's just imagine that that's what would happen. So I thought it was really fun to kind of add in all of those like smoke and fire elements coming in from the distance, which is basically what would happen if you have that much heat coming down. It'd just be like a wall of fire approaching you at the speed of the moon moving across the world. But yeah, the coolest part about that though is that as the camera like tilts up to see the actual eclipse of the glass, that's an actual real glass moon eclipse with the incorrect index of refraction on the moon.
Oh, so you're like manipulating the index of refraction of glass to show you.
Yeah, let me clarify that.
I mean, dramatized version.
It's not glass. Glass has an index of refraction of like 1.5. And if that was to be the case, as it goes over the sun, you would end up just seeing a tiny little star in the center of it. So I had to lower the index to something like 1.002, which would be the correct index of refraction for it to focus on the Earth.
Wow.
As I later learned from Scott Manley, that wouldn't actually magnify anything. It would just give you the same amount of sunlight as the sun was already providing.
So the moon would basically just be transparent.
Kind of. I mean, yeah.
Oh,
no, not really. What you end up seeing in that intro is what it would look like. The way it like goes in and it starts forming like this weird crescent and then it turns into like this donut type thing, then filling up the whole thing is what that would look like. So I thought that was particularly cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I was pretty happy with that video. Plus, being able to just, I feel like I'm starting to really hone in on my Earth renders, which is something I've been like low-key working on for
Earth renders are
6 or 7 years now.
Earth renders are the best. I get a chance to do an Earth render about once every like 3 years. I think the last time I did an Earth render was Longest Lightsaber though.
Oh wow!
Wait, no, I didn't do it.
I did that. Yeah. And that was where it like it gets sliced and then like it just like it slides apart like that. Yeah, no, I did that one.
I'm trying to think, I did one. I can't remember what it was for though.
Was that your personal Earth render that you've been? No, like at home.
Every 3D artist has to do Earth renders at some point because at some point you're going to make space renders, and that's just a natural, natural part of it. And also NASA is super cool. NASA. Yeah. They have all these like crazy high res textures, which are public domain because it's our tax dollars.
Well, I've got them all downloaded on the server.
Yeah.
They're called NASA textures.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like, you can make
but
there's
better textures now. So like, I think the next thing I want to try is because the highest resolution NASA like Earth texture I could find was like 16K. Most of them are like 4 to 8K range, and they're expensive. You have to buy them, but they're like 80K.
Man, dude, the best Earth renders have a cloud layer that's above the ground, so you're casting shadows, and then maybe even slightly moving over the ground. A light layer or self-illumination layer for the sides of the planet that are in darkness for the lights of the cities. The atmosphere above the ground, and then the atmosphere fall off that's also kind of like over the ground at the edges of the planet. Like getting all those things together, plus the shine on the water, but not on the land. Yep.
So I've got that. I've got that built in. I've got I've got all the texture maps for Earth pretty well sorted now. I've had to do a lot of manual adjustment on those over time. Like you can get a really good sort of specular map for the Earth where all of the oceans are straight up white and all the land is straight up black because water is going to be reflective, the land is not. But then after that, you have a glossiness or roughness layer, and that just adds a little bit more of like a little bit more frosted glass in some areas, a little bit more glossy in other areas on the water itself. And that kind of gives you some nice little reflective detail rather than just purely being reflective. But yeah, I took the cloud map and I extracted out all of the blackness so it has transparency in it. And I put that on top of the Earth. And of course, you expand that outwards a little bit, not much, just a little bit. And I actually took that one step further and I made a I brought that in After Effects and I added a bunch of like liquefying and, and stuff like that and animated that over the course of 300 frames and exported that out. But the problem was that was such a high resolution render because it was like, I think a 6K render, 300 frames with alpha as it's animating over time. And so like it was great for all of the renders that I was doing on my computer, but the moment I wanted to sort of upload that to the render network to render out, it was now compressing this like 2 or 3 gigabyte image sequence into the file. And it's like, so for most of the renders in the video, I ended up just making it a static cloud map rather than like the moving one that I did. So if you see like in the moon video, if you see any of the clouds sort of like shifting and moving a little bit, that was one I rendered on my home computer rather than my work computer rather than on like a render farm.
There's an interesting kind of like side story that happened too with this project. It's a little bit nerdy, so it didn't get covered too much in the behind the scenes, but you did your caustics video a while back where you explored one of the hardest things to render in 3D, which was caustics, because of all the light samples that you have to do to handle all the magnification and blurring of light as it passes through all these different facets of something that refracts it. And in this case, you're dealing with a magnifying glass or a glass moon. So, hey, an actual practical application for rendering caustics.
Totally.
But the thing is, caustics are really hard to render. So how did you solve that?
Well, I mean, first off, like Octane has a whole rendering kernel specifically tailored towards rendering caustics. So it's already, you know, significant, like 1,000 times faster. But we also got a grant from the Render Foundation to be able to use credits on the Render Network. So the Render Network itself is kind of a complicated thing to describe because it's a render farm that works on the blockchain.
So cool.
It is actually super cool. It's one of the most legitimately useful blockchain uses I've ever encountered. So if you're familiar at all with how like Bitcoin works, basically you have a bunch of computers that are hooked up to the internet and they're crunching numbers, right? You know, they're figuring out all of this complicated math so that they can eventually find a Bitcoin. And then everyone who contributed to that shares in the
it's
profit
like collective
of that Bitcoin.
work, all contributing to one big task.
Yeah,
basically.
and I don't understand what they're actually computing off the top of my head.
Over Bitcoin?
Yeah.
It's just like a complicated hash.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like they're just
like finding the next prime number or whatever.
Yeah, but
they're just doing fluff calculations.
And different blockchains do different, like have different uses. So there's some that are meant for, you know, medical records or whatever. Like there's very specific ones.
But the things that they're actually like crunching math for is always a little like, is there a purpose to this? But on the Render Network, and when I say Render Network, I'm talking RNDR. It's technically, I think, called the Foundation. And yeah, so it's called Render Coin is the cryptocurrency. It's a Web3 company. And essentially how you mine coin is you render images. And so they have this whole system in place where you can upload your project file for Octane render specifically. And it will then get distributed across however many computers you need. And each computer will render 1 frame of your animation. And so that is like just distributed rendering. So instead of going to like say an Amazon server farm that is a render farm doing all of this stuff to render your frame, it's also that typically is more expensive. You have to make sure there's all of this sort of compatibility set in and all that stuff. Whereas the Render Network, it's a lot faster and a lot cheaper, but it is still like, it still costs money. And so we ended up getting a really good grant because the Render Foundation, actually this goes out to all of you guys who actually use Octane Render at all. They are trying to give away money. So apply for a grant. You will get a lot of money in render credits. It's not like you can just take the cash and spend it at the grocery store. It's like you can only spend it on renders, but they're like, please, we need more artists to like give this money to so more people can use it. Yeah.
It's like, how cool is it that you can basically do a collective rendering thing with your computer where it's like you earn render tokens by letting your computer be used for rendering, and you can spend those render tokens to render stuff fast.
Exactly. And so what this ended up creating was a situation where rendering was no longer the bottleneck for me. Traditionally, I would spend all day working on a shot, maybe 2 shots, and then at the end of the day, I would set up the render and hit go and go home for the night because it's going to take like 10 or 12 hours to render this shot. I come back the next morning and hopefully it worked. Usually it does. Occasionally it glitches out and I have to re-render the thing and that's the whole day wasted essentially. But assuming things work, it's still like, all right, I can only really realistically get 1 or 2 renders done per day and maybe more if I'm using other computers. But then there's that's a whole other thing. It's like some of the computers don't have all the same plugins or like assets installed. And so I'm having to make sure that's all working. But on the render network, I can get a shot done at 4K high sample rate. Like we're talking like 5 to 10,000 samples.
Like movie quality.
Like, yeah, straight up like I'm not using denoising. I'm just rendering it for so long that the noise goes away. At 4K, which is insane. The render settings I was doing would probably take around 20 to 30 hours on my computer. And I was getting them back in half an hour.
That's crazy.
And so I would literally do a shot and be like, okay, the export is really quick. It just packages up all the assets and stuff you use in that file. You upload it and you have to like, I call it like tech administrative work, where it's like you're not really doing anything creative. You're just going through the menus and making it happen, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so then once that's rendering, I'm now working on the next shot. I'm now working on the next setup for this next camera animation, stuff like that. And then like I check and it's like, it's all done. Every now and then it has like some weird things where like one of the frames is still like being downloaded by a computer, because it's like you're essentially now managing, if it's a 300 frame render, you're now working with 300 different people and 300 different computer systems.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all just their graphics card is just working for you at the end of the day. So it's not that big of a deal, but every now and then like, oh, I guess this computer had some sort of problem downloading it. So you can go in and like request that node to be redone, so it goes to someone else. You're like, sorry, you're dropping the ball. I gotta let you go.
What's the most expensive render you've done on this network?
Okay. Most of the renders I was doing, because there's also 2 tiers of speeds.
Okay.
There's economy speed and priority speed, and priority speed obviously costs more money. And again, this is all in render credits, but it does have like a dollar value. So it does actually
Someone in the chat actually asked, if you were rendering and you're getting credits, can you turn that into like money? Can you get paid for letting your computer render, or do you only get paid?
Yeah, because it's real crypto money at the end of the day.
You can then
which
change
is on
into like USDC
you can literally
or
look up render coin on Coinbase.
Yeah.
You could buy render coin.
So you just wow.
And vice versa. You can literally sell the render coin that your computer has made for you
all
into
the
cash.
muck of cryptocurrency. Who would have thought? Who would have thought something actually useful? Or like, hey, your computer's crunching the numbers. We made it valuable. Like you're actually doing real work. You're rendering stuff for people, and you can make money renting out your computer to render things for people.
The answer to who is Jules Urbach, the CEO of Octane Render. Otoy specifically. Now, technically, he's not actually involved with the Render Foundation. It was like I learned this because I was chatting with I think he's the CEO of the foundation, the Render Foundation. They're a separate entity from Otoy. They had to be because of conflict of interest and stuff like that. Web3 companies have to be independent and stuff like that. It was a strange kind of thing, but apparently he doesn't really have much input on the Render Foundation now, other than kind of just coming up with it and setting it into motion. But yeah, so there's 2 different speeds, and the faster speed is more expensive. I used to just do economy because economy is still pretty fast. And for like, but since we got a lot of money, we're talking thousands of dollars worth of render coin, that the way it was given to us is not, it's in like the account as cash.
You could just go and change it for USD.
I can't do that is what I'm saying. It's not actual render tokens. It's the cash equivalent. It's complicated. Yeah, it is cash in our account. So I can't like just transfer it away. I can't sell it or do anything like that.
But you can render it away.
But I can render it away.
You can only use it for rendering.
But we're talking so like a 4K high sample shot, 300. We're talking 10 seconds long. This is a stupidly high expensive shot, would be anywhere between like $50 and $200.
Okay.
At fast speed. Economic speed, that'd be like $20 to $30.
Okay.
It's not that bad, and on the renders that I used to do when we were paying for it, because I put $100 into it, and that would be like the entire video for, I forget which one I was doing last year, and those would be in like the $2 to $5 range for an entire render. But those were like basically the same settings that I would be rendering on my own computer. So that you can scale it the same way you can scale a shot on your own computer, because it's like you can let it render as long as you want. It just gets more and more clear over time. And if you are cut for time, you can let it render to a certain point. It's going to be a noisy image, but then there's built-in denoisers that smooth that out. But then if you don't have enough samples, the denoising can make it look a little splotchy and not that great. So it's a trade-off. Everything's always a trade-off.
when you started working with this network, that gave me an idea for like a video challenge.
Oh my God,
unfortunately, based on how it works, doesn't really make sense because. So in the case of this render network, it's basically asking each computer to render a single frame from the project file.
Yes.
And since you need 300 frames, you can divide that up between 300 different computers, and theoretically, it could get done in the amount of time it takes for every computer to render one frame.
Exactly.
But I was thinking, what would it take to make one frame cost $1,000 to render? And like, I'm not talking like, oh, it's just gonna be 100,000 pixels.
There's only one way to find out.
Like, truly, like, let's say you capped it out at like poster resolution. You know, like, what would you have to put into a picture to have a computer have to spend $1,000 worth of processing time?
Is it like some crazy caustics or something?
That couldn't exist. I don't know, man.
Yeah, no,
I don't know actually.
It'd be a combination of all of the things that take a long time to render. You would want to add a lot of volumetrics, a lot of different light sources within those volumetrics, and a lot of glass objects with both caustics turned on and dispersion. So you get like the color splitting.
So like a smoky house of mirrors where there's explosions going off, and those explosions are making caustics.
The explosions are made out of molten glass.
Yes, molten glass explosions, all different colors.
Yes.
I mean, we can make it happen.
And a bunch of like transparency channels on like things throughout the thing. Yeah.
And just random hair sims going off everywhere.
And you're not allowed to cheat by making your render like single threaded so that it just like bogs down the computer.
Well, you can't do that. There's no such thing. Because it's not working on the CPU.
That's true. It's GPU based.
Yeah. And so I kind of don't think it's possible to get $1,000 single frame render. You can easily get $1,000 sequence render where you just have enough frames that take, if you have 1,000 frames that take $1 to render each, then yeah, it's going to be $1,000 render. But now you're talking at like a several minute video that you just rendered out. It's kind of not the same thing. But for like a single image to cost that much, it's basically just like, it would have to be something that takes a couple weeks to render because it'd be on one computer, and that increases the chance of a failure or something happening. Because now it's like there's no difference between someone else rendering that shot or you rendering that shot.
Could you not break up the image like into multiple different tiles?
So that's a possibility. You could. I don't know exactly how to approach doing the tile-based render, but you could distribute it that way. Absolutely, where you just have. Maybe it's something where you actually do render out an image sequence that's like 16 frames long, but but it's like your shot is rendered into 4 across, 4 down. So you have 16 tiles, and then you just, maybe you animate the camera to pan to the right. Like you zoom it in really far, and then you just animate the rotation of the camera as a sequence. That might be some way to go about doing that.
Right for that.
And then you just make each of those frames render out at like, say 30K. At 50,000 samples.
Wren, I think you just figured it out. You just have to zoom in the camera and then just have an image sequence that gives you tiles. And once again, you have to cap it at poster resolution. So at some point, you still have to make sure that the frames themselves take a long time. But I think you just figured out how to break it out into the render network.
But then you take that into like say Photoshop and you stitch it all together. Like at what scale? Like what's the maximum resolution Photoshop can?
Well, no, that's why I keep saying poster resolution.
But okay, so what resolution is poster?
Let's say you do like let's find out here. Let's say you do like a 6 foot by 8 foot poster, so pretty big.
At like what, 300 DPI?
Yeah, so 6 by 8 would be 48 feet times 12, be 576 times 300. So that'd be 172,800. I don't know what I did. Let me just get the widest point. 8 times 12 is that 96 inches times 300. So it's not that crazy actually. Your horizontal resolution would be basically 29,000 pixels. So you're looking at like a 29K image, 30K image, which is actually not that crazy.
It's a bargain.
Yeah, no, that's smaller than some of the NASA textures I've seen.
Yeah. And that's 300 DPI. Now, if you wanted to so you can scrutinize this poster with a magnifying glass, well, now you can bump it up to 60K. I don't know.
But yeah, I'm
kind of like this idea still.
There's something to
I think
it.
You cracked the problem.
But then I remember saying something that kind of made me double think about it. It's like, all right, it's very expensive to not succeed.
Yeah.
Like, let's say like, okay, I think I got it all right. Let's test it now.
Yeah.
That test cost $600 because I wasn't able to get it to the full $1,000 for the image, but it was $600. And it's like, okay, are we still going to try to do this again? until we get to that $1,000 rank and every try is just hundreds of dollars? Like, or do we just like, all right, that's pretty good. I guess this render only costs $600 though, instead of $1,000.
Sometimes the stakes are good. You know,
I mean, definitely have to be careful. But also, like, you know, one of the unique things about being YouTubers is that the world has deemed YouTubers as the one to sometimes try frivolous things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think we talked about this on the podcast last year, but when I first started using the render network, it was for the ants video last year. And I did a couple shots, and then I did like one shot that was the ant inside of a glass box, and the glass box, wait, no, was it that one? No, it wasn't that one. It was a different one with a bunch of ants all kind of just like doing their thing, and there's a bunch of like depth of field, and there's motion blur. For some reason, that shot ate through so many render tokens. And that was back because they'd given us some render tokens at the time, and I think the render tokens were more expensive than the cash. I forget how it works. But with the current cost of render token at the time last year, it was like $1,000. and I didn't know it was going to be that much going into it, that shot. I just got it back and I was like, wait, where'd all the money go? And literally like, because it was like, it had all gone to this one shot. And I was like, what happened? What happened?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was we covered all that on a podcast last year. I don't remember many of the details about it, but you can go back to that podcast. It's got an ant in the thumbnail. But yeah, that was an example of it costing render tokens rather than the cash equivalent in the account, which is what we're working with now.
Maybe we figured it out, just more ants. Like, we don't need crazy caustics. We just need a crap ton of ants, man.
Ants are the hardest thing to render, actually.
Yeah.
You just make a follow up to your caustics.
What, like 30 ants will be good?
Ants the hardest VFX shot.
It was one of the close-up shots of the camera was like kind of just dollying sideways, and they're all just, because all the ants were animated with like, you know, scratching their antenna and stuff like that, heavy depth of field. So it wasn't really that many ants in the shot, because in that same sequence, there's a bunch of other shots that literally have hundreds of thousands of ants in the frame, but they're all like super, super tiny.
I can't wait for your ants fan film to come out. Sounds like you've been working on it for so long.
I know. I've been waiting for another animated ants movie.
Ants too. Yeah. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn from the water video that Dean and Jordan did that the movie Ants had one of the first
water sims,
like legitimate like liquid simulation type things, as opposed to, because there were other movies before then that had done CG liquid and water and stuff, but the way they went about it was different.
Too bad everyone saw Bug's Life instead.
I mean, Bug's Life, I think, was the better movie.
It was a double feature weekend for sure, but Bug's Life was a better movie.
These double features, man. What was it? We were just talking about one yesterday.
Is that what you just said?
Double feature?
A Bug's Life was a better movie.
Oh, I heard A Bug's Life was a bug movie.
Astute observation.
Dude, I wonder when Ants is going to become like ironically good, like the prequels.
Have you watched it recently?
No, is it actually bad?
It has a nice patina on it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, if you can get past the like really janky, like early 3D look. But yeah, you know, I feel like after 20 years, movies kind of settle, like in a good way.
Perhaps.
You're like, movies settle. Yeah, they settle, they age. What was it we were talking about the other day? We were just looking at this. It was like, it's for this project we're working on, the face retargeting thing.
Yeah.
What was the movie? Oh my gosh. But the double feature thing is funny, man. The Ants Bug's Life thing. Yesterday we came across, they made 2 Holocaust-based boxing movies within a year of each other. Why?
Yeah.
What led to that decision? Yo, let's tell the same story twice.
Yeah, in the same year.
Story.
Was it the same company or different rival studios?
Different.
See, that's
company.
Why.
Yeah, one foreign studio, one American studio.
Because I mean, we've seen the same thing many times over the years. Armageddon, Deep Impact.
I know.
Studios get wind that this other studio is making this movie, and so they try to greenlight their own movie and try to get that out first.
I just feel like that's been dying out now that the whole like tentpole studio thing is kind of
it's
dead
definitely
as
gone away
well.
over the last like decade or two.
So it was kind of like a little blast from the past to see that. I was like, okay, yeah, good for you guys. You're still trying it. You're still trying to one up each other.
It's like gas stations each on the same intersection kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
McDonald's across the street from Burger King.
It kind of reminded me of the 90s. So
yeah.
I appreciated it.
Took me back to the 90s. The inefficient use of everything.
Completely.
Oh, dude, yeah. Speaking of which, of Ants, magnifying glasses on Ants, the moon video, right? Going back to the moon video, I had done a bunch of work in figuring out how all of the refraction and focus point and all of that stuff should work. And I learned that compressed gas also refracts light, but just barely. And so that ended up working out perfectly. If I just fill the moon with a bunch of gas to the point that it can focus light on the Earth, it would be like a magnifying glass. And I was super proud of this, and I figured out the exact pressure, the exact, so if you use hydrogen, it had to be 237 PSI to fill the whole moon with hydrogen. I mean, figured out how much mass of hydrogen that would be, accounting for all that pressure. I even thought about the pressure gradient through the moon and all that stuff. And I was super happy with that. And then I went to Open Sauce, which was an incredibly fun event, and told a lot of people about this idea there, a lot of creators there. Everyone seemed really stoked about the idea. I was kind of surprised that no one intuitively understood what would happen except for Scott Manley. He was the only one who immediately was like, oh yeah, it'd be like this. And then he started being like, oh, but what if you did that? And I was like, and I had an answer for him because I'd already thought about it. And then he did it again. And I'd already had an answer for him because I'd already thought about it. But then he was like, oh, but then that wouldn't work because of course it wouldn't be able to magnify the sun because of the field of view in the sky. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? He's like, sorry, I'm gonna ruin your day, but this wouldn't work at all. I was like, because at this point I'd already like basically finalized the script and everything about the video, but we hadn't started shooting yet because I'd gone on this trip to San Francisco for Open Sauce, and basically as soon as I got back, we're gonna start shooting this thing. And Scott was like, yeah, and I mentioned this slightly earlier about it's the field of view in the sky. And the whole reason why the eclipse works at all is because it's a cosmic coincidence that it just happens to be the same size as the sun when viewed from Earth. It's about half a degree across, half an arc second. I forget. It's like half a degree. And the reason why, and that's why you can't like magnify a laser to make it hotter. You can't start a fire from the moon because the moon isn't hot enough to create, even if you focused all the moonlight down to a point, it's not hot enough to actually ignite anything on fire. It's a thermodynamics thing. But I didn't understand the field of view aspect of that. And so it took him like 3 or 4 different times explaining it to me before I finally fully started understanding. The reason why you can magnify light focused in a magnifying glass down to a point and actually start burning, a piece of wood is because from like, say, an ant, they're looking up at the magnifying glass that you're about to burn them with. The field of view of that magnifying glass is significantly larger in the sky than the sun. The sun's like this big, but the magnifying glass is, like 100 times larger. And so it's essentially taking 100 times that slice of light down to that point.
So it's taking the light not just effectively from that dot of the sun that you see, but it's also collecting all the dots of the suns that you see in other positions and bringing them all together.
Exactly.
That's a lot of dots.
Which I understood by using a magnifying glass. I'm like, it's a funnel for light. I get that. But I didn't understand why the moon couldn't focus light either. And so like, I remember plugging it into my Cinema 4D scene of the solar system, all proper units, proper scale, all that stuff. And I remember putting the moon at its correct distance glass with the exact index of refraction I calculated. And I was like, I couldn't see anything on the Earth. Like it looked maybe a little bit brighter. I couldn't quite tell. Like I would turn the moon off and turn it back on, and like I wasn't really seeing a difference. And that's I think probably my favorite part of this whole video is the fact that like the scene that was relatively simple. It's not like I ran like a complicated simulation to do this stuff, but Octane Render is literally a light simulation thing. Like I kept getting results that were actually truly accurate. and I was confused by that. And that's then going to Open Sauce and Scott Manley explaining this to me.
It made sense.
I finally started understanding because it's the same size as the sun, it cannot make it any hotter than the sun is already providing. And that explains it. So it's not invisible. If it had a slightly less index of refraction, you would still end up with more of a shadow, I think. And so after talking with Scott Manley and figuring all that out, I was like, okay, this isn't gonna work. So I had to do this whole other thing. So I was like, I decided to take, what if I just take 0.1% or 0.01% of the mass of Jupiter, and however big that is however big that lens is gonna be. And then you compress it to the point that it has that thing. And that, I basically arrived at all that information and I gave him that information. It's like, all right, we have a moon that is 29,000 kilometers across, like twice as wide as the Earth. And it's this index of refraction, this focal length, but I had him tell me how big the focal point would be on the Earth, because I had no idea how to calculate that. He also calculated for me how hot it would get on Earth, which I didn't quite understand until he explained it.
How
there's like an equilibrium temperature. He's stupidly smart.
It's
It's
like,
ridiculous.
I started watching his videos for Kerbal Space Program.
Yeah.
And then I started watching his videos for SpaceX News. It's like, turns out he can also just do all your your high level thermodynamics calculations for you.
Cool.
Yeah, and he's a programmer at Apple. That's his day job.
Oh, man.
I won't say exactly what he does because he can't really talk about it, but yeah, he used to work at Napster.
Wow.
I thought you were gonna say NASA.
No, Napster. Like because
Napster.
you know, he's from the Bay Area, and so like he I think he joined up with Napster right after the Metallica lawsuit.
But he has a day job at Apple and he still runs his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah,
moly.
big respect.
No offense to Scott Manley, but his videos don't require a huge amount of effort
Yeah.
like our videos do, and so he's able
Still.
to like do that while still maintaining a job. Whereas like my video took hundreds of my hours, hundreds of hours from me to make over the course of weeks. And yet at the same time, both videos can be really good.
Yeah, totally.
And so, yeah, he what makes his videos so damn appealing is the fact that he's very smart and can articulate all these complex topics in a really interesting way. So, point being, he was like, yeah, he calculated out the focal point on Earth should be about 3,300 kilometers across, which is, you know, roughly the size of a continent. And I was like, okay, that's wild. Sure. So I plugged in all of my information that I had figured out into the solar system scene that I had built and turned on the caustics, and I swear to God, the exact size of the hotspot on Earth was exactly what he had calculated. And that was the moment where I really, truly realized that I had simulated the solar system. I had simulated the eclipse in a very accurate way because he had given me a number and I was like, okay, like I derived these numbers, then he derived another number about what would happen from it. I plugged in those numbers and it was exactly what he predicted. It blew my mind. It was incredible. And so like literally all the shots you see in the Glass Moon video are true simulations of what would happen during the eclipse if the moon was made out of glass.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was a really cool project to do.
We gotta get Scott just like on the speed dial for all these science videos in the future.
I mean, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got him on speed dial essentially.
I remember on the Universal video, he kind of
Yeah.
like changed the whole thing. Like after the interview, we walked away like, oh, it's a different video.
A little bit, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
that video was one that could not have happened without Scott's help.
Yeah.
This is a video that would have happened without Scott's help. It just would have been wrong.
Just send Scott the videos from now on before we upload it. All right, let's before
my
we
math.
shoot it. Yeah.
Also, speaking of all the math on that video, I didn't know how to do a lot of the math to figure out all that stuff. There's a ton of optics equations and physics that I didn't know, and I taught all of that to myself using ChatGPT.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So I want to talk a little bit about that.
I actually
because-
want to talk about LLMs a little bit too.
Okay. So I've been a huge ChatGPT hater for the longest time. And that's perhaps stating it strongly. I wasn't ever a hater, but I did put in effort to see if it was a useful tool for these science videos.
Same.
And I did that last year with Chat 3.5. And it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It would always like, I gave it questions that I had already solved from previous science videos. If the Earth was the size of a tennis ball, how big would the sun be? If you took a stack of paper and doubled it, or if you took a single sheet of paper and doubled it 100 times, how large would that stack of paper be? And various other things, questions like that. And without fail, every single time Chat answered, it would give me not only the wrong answer, but it would confidently give me
Yes,
the wrong
I
answer
hate
and
that.
say that this is correct. Here are the sources for that. And I would check the sources and, oh, these sources are straight up just made up. They're hallucinations. They're not real. And so I was like, I cannot trust this for anything. And it wouldn't even do simple math. Like I could give it an equation and it wouldn't know how to solve it. So then this year, like a couple months back, I started using 4.0, Chat 4.0.
Nice.
And it's now obviously incorporated math models, Wolfram Alpha into it natively now. And so like it can just run any math I ask it to, and also have all of the library of physics and which equations to use and all that stuff. And it was solving equations for me, which again, I was very hesitant to trust because it's like, I don't know if this is right or not. But it was showing its work. It was accurately showing its work and reasoning for choosing certain equations and certain things like that. And I was like, okay, because I would then Google it and be like, try to figure it out on my own outside of it, and then eventually come to the same answer that chat was already giving me. And the fact that it was giving me like all of its work helped me trust it a little bit more. And so I started using it heavily on the Glass Moon video to figure out a lot of these answers. Now, some people have pointed out on that Glass Moon video that I did not talk about absorption at all. And that is true. I did not, because I thought that was outside the scope of the video. Because it would end up just killing the video before it started. Because you know why the oceans are not clear? Because they absorb light. Water is clear, but water does also absorb light. So at a certain point, light does start fading away. When you get like, I don't know how deep you have to get, like 1,000 to 5,000 feet. I don't know. Underwater, light from the sun hasn't penetrated that far, so it's pitch black. Glass would do the same thing.
Oh, interesting.
Because it does absorb just a tiny percentage of light. Tiny percent. So even like a very large glass ball, it would still appear see-through. You wouldn't really notice it. But at the scale of a moon, it would absorb enough light. So in reality, it would end up being kind of like just an opaque sort of dark glass thing. A reflective...
An obsidian moon?
It would be an obsidian moon, pretty much.
Sweet.
That'd be sick. I want to see that.
And I couldn't
follow up. What would happen to your obsidian moon eclipse? And look cool. That's the end of the video.
Yep, pretty much. I couldn't find a way to fit that into the video without it being too much of a detraction from the rest of the video.
Distraction.
Because at the end of the day, this is all just a thought experiment anyway. None of it is real. None of it is realistic.
You had that whole challenge from the beginning. You're like, I'm pretty sure it's just going to be like a regular eclipse. It's not going to be like a magnifying glass. Because you already knew about index or refraction. So you're like, how do I turn this into a story?
Yeah.
And I feel like you approach it in the way like the best Mythbusters episodes did, where they like, that's a lot. That's hard to say that without a lisp. The best Mythbusters episodes, you know, like where they'd have something fail, but they're like, we still make an entertaining episode, and they would figure out a way to pose the question again that would lead to interesting results. And you did a really good job of that with the Glass Moon.
Well, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
But yeah, I do kind of regret not at least having a single sentence dedicated to acknowledging that absorption is a thing. But I've also found in the past that it's really easy to get too caught up in all of the acknowledging sentences.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, I can acknowledge this thing, but there's going to be something else I didn't acknowledge. Like in the solar panel video, how many solar panels could power the world? I didn't talk about nuclear power at all in that video because it was a video about solar. And sure enough, a lot of the comments ended up being, oh, he didn't talk about nuclear energy at all. This is bad. I'm like, oh, God dang it.
Can't make everyone happy on the internet, right?
Yeah. It's like you can't have like a focused thing without talking about everything, apparently. So it's hard.
Your story about ChatGPT 4.0 echoes a cool experience I had last week so I have this idea for a special effects gag. I've told you guys about it, I'm pretty sure, but to inform all of you lovely listeners. So, you know, we do action scenes all the time, and an important part of that is something exploding, whether it's a laser flying through the air, a spark hit going off, a gun being shot with a muzzle flash, magic spell, lightning, whatever. There's always something that's popping and giving off light. And a lot of times in visual effects, you know, it's like, oh, I'll comp this stuff later. But that means you're also adding that light later. And one of the things that, you know, we talk a lot about on Visual Effects Artist React is how hard it is to relight things, especially accurately. In the past, we've tried to deal with this by actually having like practical light effects on set. Like when we did our Urban Zelda video, I had built this like light that I could hit a button really fast and it'd flash, and it worked really well, but it wasn't synchronized to anything. It was just me hitting a button. And for the longest time, it's been like, all right, how can we make something that like synchronized with like our airsoft guns?
Can I interject real quick to add on that story with that unsynchronized light? We also use that on the Bosstown video. The first Bosstown video, when Jake starts shooting the robot with the gun, Christian was holding the light panel and hitting that light to get that light on the wall. And this is no fault of Christian's, but it is like the synchronization between Jake doing this and the light actually going off didn't line up. And so I ended up having to paint out the entirety of the light in the shot and add our own light onto the wall of the real shadow of the robot.
At least he had good reference.
Oh yeah, no, it was perfect reference. But it was just like, dang, this is one of those ideas that sounded really good on set and then actually ended up just being a huge headache after the fact.
Yeah.
So because you're now having to coordinate two human minds doing two separate things to do it at the same time without any sort of help.
And like
do
down
it
to
at
the same
time.
frame.
It has to be like
very hard.
The accuracy has to be 1/24th of a second.
Yeah.
Or 1/30th of a second. I forget what the frame rate of the boss time
Basically
video was.
impossible. But on the plus side, when you actually do pull it off or you get close enough, you almost don't need visual effects. Like it's kind of surprising how much a flashing light makes you feel like something cool is happening. With Urban Zelda, there's shots where like, we were just in the flash. It's like, we don't need bullet hits. Like we just need the flash. That's all we need. Anyways, wouldn't it be cool if we could synchronize it to the gun somehow? Well, what if you did like a fancy thing where you pull the trigger and when the airsoft guns triggers an electrode, it sends a signal. It's like, no. Like how do we make this actually work? And the idea that I've had for a while is to do something sound sensitive because airsoft guns are loud. Granted, people are running and yelling on set. This won't work, but like, an airsoft gun, when you shoot it still goes "Pukoo, pukoo," and like makes a really loud like sound. And so if you could set up a system to have a microphone sensitive trigger on a light, you could have something that flashes when a loud sound goes off, whether it's an airsoft gun or a squib or even somebody just clapping their hand, 1, 3, 2, 1, and they clap and everything triggers. It would be really useful. So I've been thinking about this for a long time and like talked to some people about it a little bit. They're like, yeah, you probably need like an Arduino and some stuff. And like, but I've never done anything like that. And like, I don't really know where to start. I've been thinking about doing this for a crew video. It's like, okay, in 3 weeks, I have to figure out how to build this thing. Who would I talk to? Yada, yada. And like, it sounds like a lot. It sounds doable, but it sounded like a lot. And then a few nights ago, I was sitting on the couch. It was late at night on Sunday. I didn't want to go to sleep yet. And I was like, okay, let's see if a large language model can help me design this thing. And rather than using ChatGPT 4.0, I used Claude 3.5.
Which you've told me a lot about, but I have yet to actually try using.
So for all of you listening, you should definitely check out Anthropic's Claude. So basically
it's basically ChatGPT open source, right?
No, that's Llama. Llama is what Facebook dropped. Claude is basically a bunch of the engineers and like devs from OpenAI who are like, let's go make our own company. And
so it's the Android to the iPhone.
More or less. And their model is better. Like Claude 3.5 is very good. The thing is, it doesn't have all the multimodal features that GPT 4.0 has, like linking out to other like interfaces like Wolfram. I don't know if it does that stuff, but one of the things that they trained it on, which makes it unique, is they made it lay out its thoughts as it talks to you. Because the way a large language model like ChatGPT works is it's always just predicting the next word. Meaning
just a very, very advanced pattern creator.
But like the thinking is only happening on a word by word basis. The like ChatGPT doesn't get to internally think what it might say and then say it. And that's why you end up with it like writing. And sometimes it'll be like, oh, I made a mistake. And it'll just say that while after writing the mistake, and then catches the mistake because now it's in the words it can read as it continues to write the next word. It's like, oh, that's a mistake. I should say it's a mistake. And like, you'll see things happen like that.
I've never seen that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it actually happen a few times, but it's because it can only think every time it effectively puts out a single word.
Right.
And so the early ChatGPTs were trained to be concise, but that makes it dumb, So it gives you a direct answer, but when you ask it a math question, it just gives you an answer. It's like, well, where's your work? Where's your reasoning? Was it good reasoning? And because there is no reasoning when it just gives you an answer because it doesn't have any other words to work off of. It's just, guessing a number. So they trained Claude to really list out its thought process. It's called chain of thought. And
chain of thought.
By doing so, it drives this LLM to actually arrive at a conclusion much, much nicer or much more nicely. So anyways, I sat down and I'm like, okay, Claude, by the way, this is free. Claude is free. Here's an idea I have for a special effects thing I want to use on a film set. And I explain it. And then Claude goes, I think I understand what you're saying. Let me list it all back to you. And it lists all the things back to me. I'm like, actually I want to tweak this. I want to tweak this. And it goes, okay, here it is again. And I was like, okay, well, actually now I'm thinking about it. It'd be nice to do this. And then Claude was like, might I suggest an OLED screen so you can see the sound level thresholds? And I said, that sounds nice. How much would that cost? And Claude's like, it would be about $10 to $20 for the extra part. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. And then Claude's like, and also since you'll be using an Arduino to run all this, I've gone ahead and assembled a script that uses all these things. And since you want to use this OLED feature, I've also added that part in the script.
Oh my gosh.
By the way, you will plug in that OLED to these two ports on the Arduino. And little by little over the next hour, we go through designing this. And then it ends up with Claude just being like, here's a full step-by-step list of all the steps you'll need to do to build this thing. Here's a full shopping list of all the parts you'll need. Here is all the scripting and programming language that you will need to load onto the Arduino from the computer. And here's the exact parts where you'll plug in each wire. And then like, if you need anything else, let me know. And I was just like, wow.
Whoa.
Like it turned this
Yeah.
multi-week project to like probably me just going on Amazon for a few hours and spending a day building it. Hopefully I haven't built it yet, but like,
Right. Yeah.
it's crazy
Yeah.
what it did. And the fact that it's also like doing like roughly the same thing, but ChatGPT doing calculations for you, for your videos, like, and showing you the chain of thought too. Like these things are becoming super useful.
It's just enabling the flow state for
Yeah.
creative people or
It
anyone
is.
really. It's just
really
like
cool.
all this stuff that you would have to spend days researching each step. It's
Yeah.
just,
And it got like, halfway through, I was actually like, you know what? I realized I want to try to control lights that we already have. We have film lights with DMX ports and stuff. I'm like, is there a way to do that? And it's like, yes, there is. You actually would buy this one piece for the Arduino. And I'm like, okay, cool. And like, well, instead of triggering one light, can I trigger multiples? And it's like, yes, actually you would do this. And here's the address you write. Oh, and I updated the code for you. Every time I
Yes.
would ask for a new feature, it would update the code for me.
Claude coming through.
And so you can actually we could wire up all the lights in our studio with just a DMX cable from daisy chaining from light to light and set this up and just clap and have all the lights go poof every time you clap.
Dude, man. Yeah, no, that's really cool. The whole coding side of these large language models is really interesting to me because I have a very minor amount of coding background. I took like C++ in college. I didn't do very well in it. I tried to get into Python a little bit a couple of years ago when I started trying to do all the neural radiance field rendering stuff. You got really into it. I feel like you've got a pretty decent grasp on Python, but I still have very minimal grasp. I have always wanted to get into Arduino programming so I can like have very specific projects, but never quite got to that point where I can make it happen.
I've always wanted to get into it, but never quite got there.
So yeah, so I like the idea of being able to use these tools to help us get to that point because I feel like theoretically I understand how like the breakdown, like the top-down outline of how code should work because I know the sort of steps that it should try to do to make it work should happen, but I have no idea how to actually implement it. Anyway, yesterday I was trying to figure out how to get camera animations that I made in, say, Cinema 4D or, say, a camera track from a camera and bring that camera path into Minecraft because I'm making a true scale of Minecraft video currently. It blows my mind that Minecraft is still somehow very relevant in 2024.
That's crazy.
15 years after it was released.
I have
I want to save that story.
I have a 4-letter username for Minecraft.
Oh my God, you're right. I thought you were about to tell your costume story, which I want to put in this Minecraft video.
Okay.
So yeah, that aside, basically there's really good shaders that are in Minecraft now, really high-res text, all that stuff. So I wanted to be able to keep the look and feel of a Minecraft shot, specifically in the Nether. Sure, I could like capture that area, export it out of Minecraft, bring it into Cinema 4D, but now I'm having to like go through all the effort of relighting it, making sure all the texture channels work, all that stuff. Or I could just render it directly inside of Minecraft. The same idea of like making something in Unreal Engine. It's like that real-time aspect, right? So I thought, what if I film myself on a green screen and we camera track that shot and then bring that camera animation into Minecraft? That's like virtual production in Unreal, but we're just using Minecraft instead, just a different rendering engine. Turns out there's not really any information online for how to do that. There's a mod called Replay for Minecraft that allows you to capture moments as you're playing it. It saves it all as metadata, a lot like how Smash Bros saves their replays, as opposed to like screen capping it, right? So if you're playing through a game and you can be saving all this metadata so you can go back and reframe shots. If something crazy happened, you get a different angle of it. But you can also import camera animations to do that. So that's like the avenue to do that. But you have to make sure your camera animation is exported correctly to be able to do that. And none of like Blender, C4D, none of these you can't just import an FBX file, a camera animation like that into the shot. So I started asking ChatGPT 4.0 how to do that. And it started writing code for me to do exactly that.
Wow.
You have to first, it started out by saying, oh, you got to export your camera as a CSV file, and then you have to convert that CSV file into a JSON file. And then, because that's the file type that Replay reads, is a JSON file, where every frame of your animation is keyframed. Relatively standard stuff. But then I was like, can we just bypass the CSV thing? Can you just export directly to a JSON file? And it's like, oh yeah. But and so it did that. And I was like, oh, cool. Okay. And it's doing it all for Blender. I'm like, but I don't use Blender. Can you do it for C4D? And it's like, yeah, here you go. I was like, I run this script and it'll export my camera animation into the exact format that the Minecraft mod replay can use. But then you still have to do a little bit of tweaking. You have to edit your code file and like add in some names and stuff like that. And I was like, man, it would be a lot easier if I could just do all that with a GUI as a plugin inside of Cinema 4D. So I started exploring that route. And I was like, oh yeah, you can make a plugin by doing this, and you can put your sliders here, and you just name all this stuff, and then you can just do that over and over and over again for every shot. And I was like, this is teaching me how to straight up make a Cinema 4D plugin to do this one thing. And I was like, that's really cool. I didn't actually get to that point. It was going to take a lot more work than I was prepared to do at the end of the day yesterday.
You're like, I don't want to make a plugin for Cinema 4D at the end of the day.
But suddenly it seemed like an approachable thing. Yeah. Whereas before I was like, I have no idea how to code. I have no idea how to make a plugin for anything. Like, this is not something that is feasible. It's not something I ever think about doing. Whereas so many of the videos we do, so many of the projects we do are started from like, oh, wait, this is something that I can do now. The idea and concept is approachable. So let's do it.
The whole idea that LLMs can like make coding better and like kind of get rid of this tedium in coding, because a lot of coding is just boilerplate stuff, almost like legalese at this point. And like, I feel like that's a kind of a thing that people haven't realized, which is like really crazy about these machines. Like what makes them, so productive is that like they're kind of revolutionizing the programming side of things to the point where I feel like we're going to approach a like post-software world where you're not going to necessarily use someone's like, oh, I made a word processor for you. It'll just be like, what do I need right now? I need a word processor. So the computer is going to write the program for you and deliver it to you at your specifications on demand.
Yeah, that's wild. We're going to look back on this podcast in 20 years and be like, wow, how was that such a brand new thought at the time?
The other like really cool thing is that ChatGPT and Claude and all these other things out there, LLMs, that are especially trained for coding, are making English a coding language.
English?
English.
Are you saying English or English?
English. Sorry, my Minnesotan is coming out a little bit.
So you are saying English?
English. The language English.
Like
it makes English a coding
I thought it was
language.
some sort of twist on like Spanglish.
No, I also
English.
say big weird.
Yeah, I know. I was actually just about to say that.
Big.
I'm begging you.
A grocery bag. Anyways, yeah, it's making English a coding language. As in, rather than having to sit there and like write if equals var parentheses, like you can just write, if the thing in normal language equals this in normal language, and you're just writing it out, chain of thought logic, like you can get stuff out of it, which is super cool. Anyways, yeah, I see the oofdas and the skulls and everything in the chat. Heck yeah.
I've had an idea for a one-wheel charging stand, an automated one-wheel charging stand. I've had this idea for a few years at this point. I just didn't have the skills to actually build it. Like physically, I think I can build this. It'd be basically a bunch of like thin sheet metal bent into a frame. But the idea is that you park your one wheel, you roll up to it, you get off and you push it into this thing. And there's a hook that grabs the handle and the front bumper and lifts it up like this. So that now the one wheel is hanging vertically on this stand. And then a charger literally sticks a little motor sticks the charge port into the side to charge it. And then when it's done, it'll pull that out and lower your board back. So you don't have to plug in your one wheel. You just roll up to the thing and you walk away and it'll automatically lift it up and start charging it. I think the mechanical side of all that I can build. I even looked into, I got like linear actuators with like scissor lift things to actually do the lifting. You would put the charger attached to a spring so it has a little bit of give, but still enough force to actually insert itself. Servo motors and little, stuff like that to actually make it work. The thing that I never was able to really wrap my head around was the coding side of that. You could probably run it with an Arduino or some sort of, I forget what you call those little boards, but essentially an Arduino. But I started realizing that with something like an LLM, I could have it basically prototype the code for me. And it's not like it's just gonna code something that is final, right? The idea is that I will use that as sort of like a template and then edit it until it works how I want it to work.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the path to actually making that work, is getting that type of help, as opposed to like hiring someone to write the code for me. And then I'm just kind of left out of the process completely. Because this way, at least you get your hands dirty a little bit and you start learning a little bit more coding as you go through it. So you start learning how you can edit it or tweak it or change it, because even though you didn't write it all, you read through it all, and you start kind of learning how each sections of the code do certain things.
Yeah. Were you thinking Raspberry Pi, by the way?
I think so, yeah.
All
But
right,
microcontroller, I think, is
Chat called it out.
the actual, not Raspberry Pi. It's what's like the top, like what's the type of controller that's called? I think it's just microcontroller.
Yeah, microcontroller.
Yeah, computers on a chip.
Sweet. Well, this is a cool discussion. It's cool hearing about Glass Moon. It's cool talking about how LLMs are helping us do cool projects. You guys can look forward to this muzzle flash simulator thing sometime this fall.
Because that's going to be a
what's up, C-Mike?
Greymatter.
It's going to be a Greymatter sequel. Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, it's not happening until it's actually happening. But we have the idea.
That's the idea.
That's the idea. Yes, it's Greymatter sequel. Here, I'll give a little teaser for it as we wrap up the podcast here. But the whole idea is that it takes place in the next apartment that they've just broken into. It involves darkness being the enemy, being immaterial when you are in darkness. So you're constantly fighting the blackness of the room that they're in. The other idea is that they end up in a hoarder's apartment. So it's just like everything's covered with garbage. And it's like, you know, there's like cans and bottles like up to their knees in the floor. And so you can hear everybody shuffling around in it. Yeah. But the moment they take the flashlight away, like, you know, somebody's shining a flashlight at you and they move the flashlight away from you, you hear the shuffling stop because the person's no longer material. So you only exist when you're in the light here in this new apartment.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's like a quantum apartment.
It's a quantum apartment, exactly. It's Schrodinger's hoarder apartment.
It reminded me of Outer Wilds. The
quantum dude. Yeah. I still have to play that game.
Dude, oh my God, it's so good.
Has space and banjos. Like, come on.
Yeah, dude. Did you
Speaking my language, man.
Niko, did you ever see the movie Lights Out, I believe? David Sandberg directed it.
Yeah.
It was based on his little short film where it's like the monster would only show up in the light or out in the darkness.
The lights on and off in the hallway.
It would only show up when the lights were out. So if you had the lights on, it couldn't be there. I forget. I remember distinctly thinking, wow, this was a really good movie because the characters were not dumb. They actually made intelligent decisions based on the context of the situation. Because that's my biggest pet peeve with horror movies is when they start making stupid decisions.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, come on. I understand panic can take over and do things, but whatever. Anyway, that reminded me of that. So, but yours is a little bit more in the quantum realm of things.
Yeah. And as you know, if we're dealing with darkness and stuff, well, the whole reason a light gag would be important to the story. So yeah. Hence the motivation to build that. Anyways.
But that's a cool thing because it's like that's based off of the concept we were talking about last week where we are trying to pair a corridor video with a corridor crew video, right? And it's like the Greymatter video, the first Greymatter video was like a short film you wanted to make with these really cool concepts. But the crew video was about like getting to those really cool concepts using Gaussian splats and stuff like that. And so you're seeing this as an avenue to warrant the Greymatter 2 film by making a video about this cool light piece.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as we have a corridor crew video coming out with a corridor video, like the corridor videos don't have any brand integrations on them. They don't really get any ad revenue.
No.
So like they have to kind of exist alongside a corridor crew video where we can actually make a brand integration and all that kind of stuff.
People have asked why we don't just put the Corridor digital short films on the Corridor crew channel. And that's something we've talked about a lot over the years.
We have talked about it. I think at the end of the day, it's just different audiences a little bit, you know? Somebody that's going to watch a cool horror short film like Greymatter, it's probably going to be like, what the heck, when VFX Artist React number 160 comes out 3 days later.
Yeah. I think I just heard Jake screaming from Texas. Hey, whoa.
I'm telling you guys.
I told you, combine the channels.
It's okay. Yeah. We go back and forth. But, you know, there's also just like, Corridor feels like an art gallery a little bit, you know? Like that's where you put the films. And they live there. So.
No, I love having that separation of like, here's where we put the final product and this is where we teach you how to do it.
Yeah.
I think for new audience members too, it makes it a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
It doesn't blur the lines as much.
Yeah. But
because also it's like if we put that short film on the crew channel, it's not like it would make any more ad revenue.
You're right. It wouldn't.
No, and honestly,
it's like a 2 or 3 minute short film is not going to get much ad revenue on YouTube, period. That's just how it works.
Yeah,
YouTube incentivizes long form content.
And if you have a good Corridor crew video about your short film, the Corridor crew audience is going to know about it anyways.
Yeah.
You know, which is weird because like the behind the scenes to Greymatter has twice as many views as Greymatter.
Yeah.
Well, and that's another thing. It's like the way the algorithm works. If we upload videos every month that only get 200K views, that's going to drive the whole thing down because YouTube's going to say, oh, now a fifth of their videos are not getting any views. I'm not going to recommend it as much.
Yeah.
And
well, who knows? Who knows what's going on behind those?
That's
the Wizard of Oz
that's what I
curtain,
perceive. I mean, every time we have
I don't think you're
a
wrong.
stinker, it kind of brings everything down. And I think that that's something we need to be aware of. And it's the same conversation with like, do we start putting the podcast on the crew channel under the podcast segment? You know?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
there's a new
something we've
podcast
started
tab.
talking. Yeah, Christian, you want to talk about that real quick?
Well, I don't know much about it other than there's a new podcast tab on all YouTube channels, so they're separating it. So
Yeah.
it could live there, but it's the same debate.
I'm just like, I feel kind of like skeptical. I'm like, YouTube's constantly giving us features that I feel like will hurt us, you know?
That did happen with premieres.
Yeah,
we did.
that's what I'm saying.
We uploaded World's Longest Lightsaber. The premiere feature was brand new,
yeah.
and it comes out, does the premiere thing. People are chatting. It's fun. Right afterwards, views are tanked.
Yeah.
It's like getting like 1,000 views a minute, not
Yeah.
minute, like every 10 minutes. And this is like the corridor channel back in 2018 or something like that. So it's popping, but that's really low. So we straight up delete it and we re-upload it. Just for like, screw it. Screw
Yeah.
this premiere thing.
Mhm.
We're gonna re-upload this video. And then it goes on to become the #1 most viewed video we've ever made.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was about to say, it was like, but it couldn't have been that bad. It's our highest. It's got like almost
No,
200 million
that's-
views.
That's
Yeah.
the new upload.
Yeah.
yeah, I
We-
forgot
that's a
about that. I
re-upload.
forgot about that completely. Oh man.
And if you think about the psychology, because at the end of the day, like the algorithm is the audience, you know, like if you think about the psychology, you're on YouTube, you see a thumbnail for a video you want to watch, can't click on it. Oh, okay, whatever. Move on.
Wait, what?
Can't click on
Like,
it.
as in it's a,
Oh,
pre-
the
a premiere.
premiere.
It's a
Right.
premiere. It's
Yeah,
like, it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
out
yeah,
yet.
yeah,
It was like,
yeah,
why
yeah.
are you serving it to me?
Oh man, dude, that reminds me of the time I made the commercial for Future Motion's One Wheel.
Mm.
This was like what 2021. I made a whole video about. I worked with Cade from Future Motion at the time, and I was really excited about the project because it involved painting out the one wheel out of every shot. So people are riding along on like these little ghosts where their feet are like a foot off the ground, but there's nothing there. And the tagline was "Something's missing," and it's like the one wheel's missing from your life. That was the idea, and I was really proud of the work we'd done on it. And it went out, and they put it out as a premiere on YouTube. And so it sat there for 24 hours for all of the One Wheel fans to speculate that they were about to launch a brand new board.
Oh, jeez. That
And so
backfired.
then the video drops, and all of the fans who are expecting that are immediately disappointed.
No.
And so they start hating on Future Motion hard. They start hating on the video. It's like they're just taking all their frustration out on like the quality of the video. And so they start like basically saying the video's garbage, the effects are bad. And I'm just like, what the heck? I felt like personally attacked, and I thought it was like a fun thing. And so like, yeah, that ended up being a whole thing. Yeah.
Another
but then
nice
they did
feature
end
of
up
premieres.
announcing like 2 months later, they announced the GT. So they had something like, because that was the other thing, is that like it's been a while since they announced a new product. This might be it. Is this the time? And it was like, no, it wasn't the time. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, premieres, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes they can be good for like building hype, but if they can also be problematic in that they can build up expectations that you can't possibly deliver on.
And like, let's say you click on the premiere 5 minutes after it started. It's like, well, now you can either watch it live with everybody and lose out in the first 5 or 10 minutes, or you can jump to the beginning, and that defeats the whole purpose of watching it live with people. It just, I don't like the premiere feature.
Yeah, and I think that's why we haven't
You
really
can't
done
tell.
it since.
Yeah,
We did it a few times though.
we did it for Son of a Dungeon season 1 too, which I think made sense for what those were, because it's very much
Those
like
are
a
hour
sit-down
long each.
communal. Yeah, we're watching it together with everybody on YouTube. Like that was a watch party, so that's a little bit different. You know, as an event. Anyways, yeah. Okay, so we're reaching the end of our podcast,
All right.
but at this point,
Thanks for listening.
we will do a hangout with people on the live stream for a little while longer. So to everybody on YouTube listening to the podcast,
Or
thank you so much
Spotify
for
or
joining us, or Spotify, or
all the other
wherever your favorite
places.
podcasts are listened to on your device. Thanks for joining us, and love to have you join us in the live stream where you can chat with us. And until then, see everybody on YouTube later.
Listen to you on the next one.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
See you next week.